The entire data structure of the ArchiCAD model and the IFC model derived from it can be scheme-driven. Assigning a scheme to a project lets you tailor IFC data management and export to a particular project instead of having to use the entire IFC property database. The scheme-based workflow supports the following goals: data-specified interoperability with other disciplines using common data mapping, company standard property management, compliance with strict export requirements of IFC or other documentation standards. Use the scheme-based workflow to store or create data which are important to your project, to define value mapping between ArchiCAD data and IFC data, to filter the property views of the element settings dialog boxes so they contain just the scheme data, to limit saved IFC data to just the scheme-specific data. Let's see how it works in this short video. Here is a building from a project designed by Rift Architect Studio in Norway called the Nordre Jarlsberg Brygge project. Let's focus on the spaces. Use IFC Manager in ArchiCAD to see the IFC model that was generated out of this project. Filter the model hierarchy to show just the visible elements. Go down to the spaces. As you can see, by default, ArchiCAD shows the attributes and properties of IFC spaces as defined by the IFC Coordination View standard. Scroll through the common properties. You'll see that some of these properties already have assigned values, like space category, covering types, and areas. Sifting through all this data can seem overwhelming. Let's simplify things by assigning a scheme that works for us. Start by launching the IFC Scheme Setup. The tree in the left panel contains all element types, element groups, and assignment types available in the IFC standard documentation and editable in ArchiCAD. Select any entity in the tree to see its available data, as filtered by the current scheme. In this example, the current scheme is the default one, IFC Coordination View Standard. Let's try it with a different scheme. How about the scheme for COBE? This is short for Construction Operations Building Information Exchange, which is a widely used standard in English-speaking countries. We'll use the US-specific version. Now the dialog shows different data. IFC entities shown in bold are the ones required by the current scheme, which is COBE. For example, COBE space entities require not only just the general attribute data, like name and description, but also the room tag property. It also requires the omni-class space by function classification data. These schemes are predefined, but you can easily add new properties or create a new custom scheme. When you add a new property, you can group it into a particular property set, give it a property name, define its property type and value type. As you can see, there are many types to choose from, ranging from the simple label type to a complex table type. You can add new classification reference data. Now that you've customized the scheme, you can save it in an XML format. You can reuse the scheme in any other project or send it to coworkers. Adding new data to a scheme is easy, as well as is deleting. We'll delete our changes now and return to the COBE scheme. The COBE scheme requires that you assign IFC data to items like door styles as well. In other words, you have to assign data not just at the element level, called components in COBE, but also at the group level, which is called type in COBE. Here are some examples. In COBE, when you assign the name attribute to the type, that name has to include the main door characteristics. To generate these required type names automatically, you can set up a mapping rule. Here, the name attribute is generated by combining the following door parameters: library part name, building material, width, and height. You can add text characters to make the name easier to read. In COBE, certain properties require a default constant value. For example, the asset type value must always be defined as fixed. For more details on setting up mapping rules, see the data mapping video in this series. We switch to our new scheme, and the data displayed in the IFC Manager change accordingly. You'll also notice that the Tool Settings dialog boxes, like Zone Tool Settings, will also change to display the corresponding data fields. As you've seen, when you switch from one scheme to another, the properties specific to the original scheme will be visible as not scheme-specific data. You never have to worry about losing the data you have entered, even if you are switching schemes from day to day depending on your IFC export needs. The non-scheme specific properties have a red X in front, meaning you can delete it manually at any time, regardless of which scheme you're using. At any point, you can restrict the displayed data to just those that belong to your scheme. With one click, you will now only see the data that are required by the COBie standard and nothing else. In this example, we see that the room tag and OmniClass classification data are required for a space besides the main attributes. Let's look more closely at this OmniClass. It's easy to enter the required data by using the table provided by the OmniClass standard. Enter a search term that expresses the function of your space, then choose the best match. The data is filled in immediately using the proper format. You can define other values manually. Don't forget that another way to enter the same data is through the Elements Tool Settings dialog box. In our example, that would be the Zone Settings dialog box. When you export an IFC model, define which data to export. Do you want to export all available data to the model elements? Or just the data that's specific to the current scheme? You can do either one. Your preferred model export options are collected in so-called IFC translators. Predefined translators for popular standards, such as COBie, are ready to go. Find the Properties to Export option in IFC Translator Settings under Export Options. This is where you can define which set of properties to export, scheme-specific only, or all of them. Now, check the exported architectural model in Solibri Model Checker. Looking at the spaces, it's easy to see that you exported only the items that are COBie specific, such as the room tag property, and OmniClass classification. There is no superfluous data here, just that which is required by the COBie documentation standard. In summary, the IFC database for a BIM model can contain a vast amount of data, but ArchiCAD has several functions that help you reduce all this to manageable proportions. Filter the database by using a predefined scheme. This scheme, which is predefined for the IFC standard you are using, limits the data shown to just those which are required by your standard, so you can focus on those. Similarly, you can use a scheme-based filter when exporting an IFC model from ArchiCAD. This way, the consultant who gets your model only receives the BIM data that are relevant for the current purpose. ArchiCAD makes it easy to achieve straightforward and targeted data exchange.